to order. I will call the meeting to order again, so we get the full thing on the record at 3 o'clock on Monday, September 19th, 2022 for a regularly scheduled design review committee meeting. For the record, I can see that both members are present, as well as here we have in person staff members, Jenah Thornborrow, Charles Wadhams, Hanna Veal, and I can see on Zoom we also have planner Betty Gunn. We do have a couple of suggested changes to the agenda, and that is continuance of 2 items. Can you please remind me of the dates for those?
So we have design review fiscal year 2022-0023, Jory Delgado with JD Planning and Consulting LLC. They're requesting to be continued to the date certain of September 29th, which is a Thursday at 3 p.m. This is a special meeting for the design review committee. There is also subdivision fiscal year 2022-0004 LA Estates, combined preliminary and final plat processed as a planned unit development by Araya Orr. They are being moved to October 17th, 2022 due to noticing errors.
Thank you. And so those items, those continuances could be included on the consent agenda. Are there any other changes to the agenda, either by the committee or by staff?
None by staff.
Not by me.
All right. Thank you. And we're ready for the consent agenda.
I'd move to approve the consent agenda, which includes minutes of September 8th and then the previously mentioned new dates for 2022-0023 and 2022-0004.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And with that, there are 2 public hearings that were held over from our last meeting. The first of which is subdivision fiscal year 2022 #2 Honcik Townhomes subdivision located at 3900 North Reach Street. And the applicant is Jeff Hatch. And with that, I do know that the applicant does intend or is hoping to be able to submit a late exhibit today. And it is within the committee's discretion, since it is a late exhibit, whether or not to allow for that.
Sure.
All right. And with that, I'll give the floor over to you, Mr. Hatch.
Good afternoon, Design Review Committee. Thank you for your consideration of our design review application. From our last hearing, the request was primarily to clean up and clarify documentation. So I wanted to just kind of briefly go over what we've done the last 2 weeks. So as far as the site, just to kind of familiarize ourselves, we are adjacent to Heron Park. This property actually is owned by the city and is part of Heron Park. Last time we talked about the enhancement of the pedestrian pathway and how that connectivity resolves the issue of not having any public connection to that park from the sidewalk. One of the coordination questions was in regards to the common lot areas. And so one of the late exhibits is the actual layout of the property lines and the common areas, so that we could highlight and justify the tabulated calculation to city staff as far as how we came up with our justifiable square footage for our common areas. The other request was to engage the city and be able to provide the committee with a mechanism as far as how we would go about acquiring the public access that we are proposing. And so in discussion with city staff, it looks like we would have to request that access from the city council. And so that would be something that we would be fine proposing as a as a condition of approval, which we would then present after our P&Z and subdivision applications are processed. So at our last hearing, we had discussed some of the complexities of trying to route a public sidewalk in this manner, which provide the access through the center of the property. There was some discussion about potentially, meandering this back to this public sidewalk. I would probably leave that to the discretion of city council, since they're the ones that are going to be approving that. But in general, we would be conditioning to provide a public access connecting to the park. So in summary, the three primary design review related items was the question about the open space. And so we've tabulated our open space, a total of approximately 13%. So we're able to justify that. Question about the parking. Parking proposed will be on the common lot, which we've now provided a clear exhibit as far as that intention, and that can be coordinated with the HOA. And then the engagement with Heron Park and the Greenbelt, provided in those exhibits as far as how we would have that. And in addition, we are proposing publicly accessible labeling and wayfinding for that access. In addition to what we've summarized here, all the documentation has been coordinated with Hanna. To the best of my knowledge, it now site plan matches the landscape plan, matches the elevations. So all that stuff has been clearly cleaned up and identified in a more proper manner. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hatch?
None of the modifications or additional documentation addresses the elephant in the room that we keep coming back to, which is the street front presence and street front engagement. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I don't have any.
Thank you. Ms. Veal, do you have any additions to a staff report that you'd like to bring up?
I don't have any additional staff comments regarding the staff report or the new submittals that were just added into the record today. I do want to note that the drafted decision document has been edited to be in the denial per the design review committee's request at the September 8th design review hearing committee, or committee hearing. So that is what is on the record. It isn't only denial today.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Veal?
I don't have any.
No.
Seeing none. As there has been new information introduced, certainly we will take public testimony, but would request that you tailor your testimony to the new information at hand. And it does look like Hanna has her hand up to testify.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Design Review. I was a consultant on this file, Hanna 215 East 34th Street, Garden City, Idaho, for the record. When we started the design of this project, we were faced with starting with providing fire access and then understanding that Garden City's code doesn't allow us to take direct access off the street. So when we look at those two sections of code, they have similar competing ideas. So we understand the thoughts and we understand the discussions and respect all the wonderful comments design review have provided. And we know that design review has taken the approach that they wanted us to look at a redesign, but very specifically, we want to understand if we go into a redesign, what section specifically, or how we can specifically address that section of code that it doesn't interact with the street. And equally, we don't see a section of code that gives specifics on how we need this development to, quote, interact with the street in a less vehicular, more pedestrian manner. That's just something we don't see in code. We do believe that this is just a code issue and it's not real clear. And we're happy to have the discussions with City Council. We think this is a quality project for the neighborhood. We just want to understand further how code speaks to a future design that would work well with all parties, essentially. So thank you guys so much for your time and discussions on this project.
Thank you. Any questions of Ms. Ball? Seeing none, is there anybody else that wishes to testify on this matter? If you're on Zoom, please either speak up or utilize the raise your hand feature, and I'm not seeing anyone in person. All right, we can go ahead and close the public testimony portion. Mr. Hatch, do you have any rebuttal?
Yeah, thank you again for your consideration. I understand and respect your consideration for the denial. I think the last 2 weeks has been great coordination with Hanna. We're ensuring that the documentations that move forward are accurate and clear in that intent to try to clean up as much concern as possible. And with that, really appreciate your time and your comments, Design Review Committee, for this application.
Thank you. And then we'll close the public hearing and open it up to any discussion that the committee may have.
I think at this point, Derek, for me, maybe we should just walk through the draft decision document and go over each of those items, just so that they are, I mean, I still feel the same way that I felt in multiple sessions or hearings that we've had, that that main item, which was the 84B-3 direct and permanent entry pathway, that's the connection to the street is not with having the parking access and all of the vehicular access, basically dividing the development from the street. I think all the focus has been put on pushing it far back to the site for an enhanced connection to the greenbelt, and that's contrary to what the intent of the code is. So I
agree. And it's maybe not contrary to the code to connect with the green belt, but it's contrary to the code to not connect. It can connect with both. And maybe that was what was suggested in February or prior. So I think that ultimately that's what will lead to a successful project if it connects to both, because I don't want to sacrifice connection to the green belt for connection to the street, but it needs to have connection to the street for all the reasons it says in code and all the reasons we've said in this is our 10th hearing, I think, if I counted correctly. So yeah, I'm in agreement with you, and we can kind of work through those things. It's as written is kind of summarizing and addressing how we've kind of looked at this throughout the process.
The findings start on page 7 of the draft potential.
yeah. And I was
And
just
do you-
looking at that first one and explanation and denial. I think there's some of this stuff. The site is lacking public connections to the amenities such as the adjacent park. I think they've shown that there's a connection there now. That's really not something that it's lacking. The site design is not quality, and that is setback and around a driveway and fails to address the public realm. I think that is correct. That are not met. See, I think that some of these really don't apply. Promote quality design and architectural interesting buildings. I think they're architecturally interesting. That's not the focus on the river. It does have a focus on the river. It just doesn't have a focus on the street. More accessibility to the green belt. I think it does that. Thurman Dill match. I don't know that C applies. I think goal
No.
number 7 probably does, because that's direct connection to those
Right, right.
residences, not. So maybe strike those. Goal num-
Could
What?
I also, I'm hearing the potential to strike, the site is lacking public connections to amenities such as the park. Strike 2.3, 5.2.2, 5.5.
And 5.5.2.
Okay. And then keep 7.1.
Finding 2. I think that's fine, I guess, just not sure if we need to walk through all those different sections that are referenced there to see if that's applicable.
We can share Hannah's staff report and walk through those sections.
Okay.
Can we do your staff report?
My staff report. Oh, not the decision document.
No, so we can go through and look at 8.2B3, 8.4B3, etc.
Where do you want me to start?
8.2B3, please.
Yeah.
2B.
And that one's minimum street frontage.
4B. Then-
2B3.
Okay.
So page 14 of the staff report for finding number 2 on page 9 of the draft decision.
Yeah, that's applicable. with encroachments and street frontage.
And then 4B3 is,
And then I don't think you're actually sharing that, Hannah. So 2B3 keep,
yes,
Yes,
84B3,
yes,
84D5,
okay.
yes. Because
Yes.
guest parking was not really accessible to guests.
84I7,
Landscaping,
Yes,
84L4,
now did this one get addressed in their latest resubmittal percentage of open space?
Yeah, did they ever put common on one lot?
I think that's what they were showing. Go back to that.
And was that plat updated to have common areas all in one lot?
The late submittals came in pretty late this afternoon, so I wasn't able to really analyze the updated information. I can,
It looks
So maybe
like,
it's,
I'm just looking at those. I just pulled that up again. Yeah, there it is. It looks like they're the common area landscape for that island element. And then 7's on a separate lot. Hannah, can you, just scroll back to that, to the landscape plan there? Next one down, maybe. Oh, next one.
so I was looking at that first page in that, in the submittal packet, and it looks like they have isolated the guest parking space onto its own lot. I'm not sure what lot 7 right here is intended to be, or 8, but it looks like the common drive isn't its own lot, but I mean, it's a little difficult to interpret.
so still not enough information to review kind of
Yeah.
answer. So we could leave it in and then that could be addressed as a condition. Potentially.
Yep.
Mhm.
Then the next item's 84L3.
And that's open space. Talking about removing all mature trees. No easements. And so maybe because now it does connect to Heron Park, we can strike that section.
Yeah, I think scroll up further, Hannah. Can you go up just a little bit further?
And I guess that stays because there's still no easement. It stays, but then it could be conditioned later to develop a actual easement with the city. It's kind of a timing and process thing.
Yeah.
So maybe the connection to Heron isn't applicable anymore, but the easement, lack of easement, I guess, is still applicable.
Yeah, so we can strike.
Yeah, we're not going to strike from the staff report, but that 84L3
Oh,
still,
yeah, I gotcha.
still stays.
Yes, it does.
86B7.
And then if you wouldn't mind scrolling to 86B7.
And I do know as part of the late submittal today, they had requested an additional waiver. I don't have it in front of me. But there should be one more formal waiver request.
And then on that, I think this might actually be one. Can you see the code now, or is it still on the staff report?
Nope, I could see it.
Yeah, code came up. So where's the waiver to go to 2 feet?
I'm sorry.
In the staff report, it was saying waiver setback standards allowing for side setbacks to be 2 feet, but I don't see on the site plan that there's a 2 foot.
So the original waiver request for side setbacks that weren't inferior to the lots. So adjacent to the other properties was 2 feet. With the new site plans, it might need to be updated.
So the site plan shows 5 feet, but in actuality, that's 2. Or they're requesting 2?
I think the original request was 2 feet. Now it has decreased or increased to 5 feet.
I think you can leave that code reference in there then.
I
Yep,
suspect,
me too.
and perhaps the where it's been suggested that it doesn't meet the purpose, is that?
Okay, where are we? Are we moving on?
Are we keeping 86B7 in the finding?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then.
Then we go down to
findings 3,
finding,
4, and-
yeah, just go down to finding 6, I think.
Okay,
And then strike
And
the
that's-
section that says the development reduces access to the greenbelt.
Well, I'd leave that because the way it's worded, it's suggesting that. The way it's worded, it's suggesting that that pedestrian alley between the buildings doesn't look like it's a public access, which it doesn't. So it reduces greenbelt access because it doesn't present itself as a public thoroughfare, right? And it also mentions again that
It cannot be, or it's not evident that it can be.
It's
procured at
not.
This time.
it's not official.
Okay.
And strike the mention of Heron Park right after the page break.
Yeah. And are we deficient of streetlight?
Don't
What's,
So right now it looks, there is a street light on Reed Street. The construction plans weren't clear if that street light was to remain. Or stay through the construction of it, but the proposed site plans do show an existing street light. We just don't have a demo plan for the street light.
So maybe that could be reworded to it needs one. If they take one out, they have to replace one or something like that.
and
I'm going back up.
okay,
I'm going back up to the fourth one. The units do not, oh no, where is it? The proposed units are not in scale and form with the existing neighborhood. I don't know that that's
that's not a reason for denial. I mean, I
scale
don't
or
think it's.
form. Yeah. Okay. And then 7. Eliminate this Heron Park reference. Yep, the rest, just eliminate the Heron Park reference on finding 7 and the rest of it can stay, I think.
all right. And then just want to verify that the discussion is to leave in on finding number 6, the development reduces access to the green belt and that the access through the site is not adequately designed, etc.
Correct.
Okay,
It's not adequately designed and the easement isn't in place.
goodness. Plan unit developments have a lot of findings. They do continue on page 12 as well.
So leave in finding 1, not applicable or unknown, leave in 2. And I would leave in 3 because the existing network includes the green belt, and we've talked about that not being adequately addressed for a couple of reasons. Or not applicable 5. Eliminate the Heron Park reference in 5. And 6, I'm not sure the reference to the comprehensive plan. But like in general, if it's not meeting code and it's not engaging with the neighborhood as code suggests, then I think finding 6 stays in for that reason.
Yeah,
That
I
would
think finding
un-
6 stays, finding 7
That would-
stays.
Yeah.
Conditional use findings then.
I don't think the intensiveness was part of our reasoning for denial.
Yeah, that's, I mean, based on the use.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that can read as that can read as
It's
compliant,
compliant.
I think. And then finding 3 stays for all the reasons we've been talking about.
Yes,
Same with 4.
and 4.
All right. I do appreciate your time going through that. And then
I
would that
would,
result in a motion?
yes, I move for denial. With the amended draft. Findings.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. Thank you both, and thank you to the applicant and public who testified.
Thank you.
And we will move on to the second continued hearing for design review fiscal year 2022, number 14. Cathy Sewell is requesting a new mixed-use multifamily construction project located at 210 East 35th Street. And then it looks like the owners there's Ms. Sewell as well. The applicant team will turn it over to you for your presentation. Just for the record, there was a late submittal on this application as well, submitted related to the parking standards. Again, on this, it's up to the committee whether or not to permit that exhibit.
That's fine.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Cameron Clark. This is my partner, Bree Katz, and Cathy Sewell is with us in another rectangle there, our collaborator and architect and designer on this project. At our initial hearing, there were only 2 issues discussed that required adjustments or more information in order for this project to be approved by this committee. Number 1 was our parking plan, including on-site parking provided and alternatives to on-site parking. Number 2 was the design of the resident entrance of the building. We have submitted a redesigned resident entrance, as well as a letter of explanation for our parking plan, both of which Cathy will review with you shortly. But we think it's important to point out that we've worked to follow the guidance in the Garden City Code that alternatives to providing on-site parking are encouraged, including other forms of transportation. And we do believe that the innovation of the on-site car share program as another form of transportation makes this a viable project in this C2 zone portion of the Live Work Create district. We also wanted to acknowledge and thank one of our neighbors, Kate Falkenstein, who has entered into the record the study I referred to last time from UC Berkeley regarding car reduction benefits of enrollment in car share programs. We understand Ms. Falkenstein's concerns about street parking, and we believe the study indicates a substantial benefit to this project. By choosing to live in the Sonder, people will also be choosing to enroll in the car share program. And we don't need this program to reduce the car ownership to the 0.24 cars per household indicated in the study in order for it to be a viable project. But we do believe the data supports our conclusion that 1 parking spot per household plus access to the dedicated on-site car share is a reasonable plan in light of the design as a whole. We'd also like to acknowledge the recently published Garden City Parking Survey that states that it's to be included as a record document to inform the city when selecting parking strategies. That survey shows that a majority of Garden City residents believe that the residential parking standards and the residential guest parking standards both, quote, require too many parking spaces. That's a survey just from this summer. Lastly, we want to make sure that we're all literally on the same page for today's discussion and that both committee members have the same set of documents that we're referencing, including we have the updated entry design, the letter regarding our parking plans. I think that was the one that came in the next day, so it's technically late, but has been admitted, that goes through our how we've come to the conclusions of parking the project the way we have. But most importantly, the 7 required findings under which we applied, beginning with number 1, the proposed design is in conformance with the purpose of the zoning district and all dimensional regulations, not the revised version that has number 1, the proposed design shall comply with all design standards in this title. There was some confusion this last week and those were changed in a report and then changed back. And we just want to make sure that we're all following the same rules and treating this project under the regulations that existed when we made our application. So is that we good? Are we all on the same page there, you guys? Just to confirm before we go forward.
And maybe if Hanna is everything that Matt has just mentioned in the document that's titled with all caps late material,
So let
which
me.
is the letter from the architect. That may just be, that's just the letter from the architect, actually.
I
They're
might,
both from the architect, one about parking, one about the redesign of the entry.
I might note on the website,
Mhm.
there are 2 separate links. One's for resubmittal documents, 09/12/2022, and then the next document is resubmittals 09/13/2022. I believe that those are the 2 sets of documents that are being referenced. And then the other point, not to take Ms. Veal's comment away from her, but yes, this application came through and was heard under the previous findings, and those are drafted. There's draft potential document drafted with those on the website as well.
So yes is the answer to that, Matt.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Cathy, if you want to talk through the redesign.
Yeah, so I guess first question, maybe for staff. So when we submitted our revised material, we received the staff report on Friday. And I just wanted to note that it appears on page 14 of the staff report. We made some changes to the exterior, included an additional sheet. And it looked like the language in that section 84B-4 did not reflect some of those changes. So that might be something that we can discuss later. But then I also wanted to comment that since we got the report on the 16th, it seemed like there were still some concerns with staff in regard to the entry and possibly parking. So we did go out over the weekend and tried to find some projects that we thought were similar in scale and scope to ours, you know, residential, small lot, mixed use in Garden City that have been reviewed and are constructed. And so the material that I wanted to share today would just kind of show those projects that we found. So I just want to make sure that's good to submit as, I guess, an exhibit to the hearing today.
I think that's fine.
Okay. Okay, so and I guess in terms of the, you know, that the task at hand here today is to discuss the parking and entry. I don't know if the design review committee has any initial thoughts, comments on the revised material that we have submitted. It's great. Thank you for addressing our comments. We're good to go, or if we need to make sure that we go through each of our revised materials in detail.
I would appreciate you walking through your explanation on how you've addressed that entry element and kind of your thought behind what you've done, the changes.
Okay, that's great. So I'm gonna share my screen. Hold on. So, okay. Can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, so, you know, as we've kind of mentioned throughout the project, we felt that, you know, when we had our initial pre-application meeting with staff, we reviewed our preliminary drawings, and, you know, the box that got checked for our project was 84C-3 general provisions for non-residential development. And, you know, we understand, you know, we've always had the kind of the residential component, but that was the box that was checked. So through the design process, we did focus on that, but we do understand the residential nature of the project. But we do kind of think that it's created some confusion because we are not a single use project like a multifamily residential project would be. We have various uses, and based on the project being mixed use, ground floor space on, you know, workspaces up on the second floor, the site providing parking, you know, we're going to have a couple of entries. And so I think part of our homework that we did over the weekend was to go and try and find those examples in and around Garden City. But I do just want to point out a couple of things in regard to the multifamily residential and the main entrances. And here, creating the entry through architectural treatment, lighting, and address identification. This is really the criteria that is indicated in that section for creating an entry. I wanted to highlight and just quickly go through the non-residential provisions. We do think that both the pedestrian pathway, because it does mention building entrance, a direct connection between the main building entrance and the public sidewalk. Once again, we don't necessarily have a main building entrance, but we do have entrances that do have a direct connection to the street or the sidewalk. Direct, convenient, attractive pedestrian pathways should be provided. They're clearly marked and connect all portions of the site. This section D gets into when you have, people and cars intermingling a little bit to try and create some kind of a distinction between those pathways. And so I highlighted this section here, which we'll show in our plan, but a distinct pattern and texture. The entrance part, the primary entrance, or item A, the building closest to the street, which seems to allude to that there might be multiple buildings. For us, there's just one building, but the primary entrance of all buildings, once again, we just have one, building recess. And then here are just some around that entry with a non-residential landscaping, outdoor seating, plazas, courtyards, public art, special paving, all these things that are considered with the non-residential development. So as I mentioned, we tried to find some projects that were of our scale, mixed use, multifamily and that. So the first one we found, which is just right around the corner from us, just up the street at 35th and Clay. This is a mixed use development. Property size is right, basically what ours is, around 12,000. This project, however, was reviewed as non-residential, code section 84C, even though there's residential components to it. The non-residential use on the ground floor, about 1,700. On the second floor, and this is the original application, I know it has changed, but the non-residential portion on the second floor, residential use, about 1,100. So here we're looking at how the applicant handled the residential entry to this mixed use building. Here on this side of the building, there's 2 units. This is their residential entry here. In terms of architectural treatment, there's a canopy noted here, some lighting, and what we're saying is the building or identification addressing associated with that. One item of note, our entry into the resident is around on the side. This residential entry is approximately 46 feet from the edge of the sidewalk. Our proposed project has a residential entry of around 30 feet. So we're actually a little bit closer than they are in terms of where that entry is.
With a direct footpath.
Pardon me?
With a direct footpath.
Oh, correct.
Our entry as opposed to this across a parking lot.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And then I just wanted to note the non-residential entries. There's one that faces 35th, and then there's one that faces Clay. Both of these are articulated similar to the residential one, canopy. There is some addressing and some light fixtures. And there is a direct path connecting to the sidewalk here along Clay. 35th Street, there is no real direct connection. There is an ADA access aisle, but that's part of the paving system. So this project, we thought it's mixed use, it's right around the corner, it's in our neighborhood, and it's small scale. So the next project we looked at was Trailwinds. This one has been mentioned in the staff report primarily for some of the parking, but this is a full-on multifamily development, much larger in size, over 2 acres, much larger in just the residential use, 68,000 square feet. This is over off of 42nd. They have 2 entry locations. The first one, they have a big parking area. Just wanted to note, this is the residential entry. Articulation of the entry with the covered entry, signage. And then this is the other entry element off of 42nd, which is similar to the one off the parking area, the signage, canopy, sidewalk connection to the entry from the street. The next project is just right adjacent to this one, the Parkway Station. This is a mixed-use development. Lots of property here, 1.07 acres, non-residential use on the ground floor, about 13,000. Number of residential units is 40. We did only count 30 parking spaces, which we thought was interesting based on the number of residential units and the non-residential use. So I do not know how that was calculated, but there's definitely not one parking space for every unit. But just wanted to note how those residential entry locations are articulated. Both entries into the structure for the residents are off of the parking lot. There's this east entry here, which I think they use brick to articulate that entry. Down here is the addressing for that. And then here is the west entry element, once again, with the brick detailing and some addressing at the door. This right here is a breezeway that takes you from the parking onto Adam Street. So here's a shot if I was in the parking lot looking through to Adam Street. Once you get to Adam Street, this is that location here. There's no signage to indicate how you get to the residential units. So I'm not sure how that is achieved, but at least in terms of how those residential entries are articulated, they've used some brick, they've got their signage, and that's pretty much about it. So now I guess we want to just kind of walk through our project from when we first had our pre-app design review hearing on the 20th, and what our proposal was then, and kind of how we've revised that from our meetings and comments. So once again, to reiterate, this project is mixed use, primary. We have a small ground floor retail or commercial space. This is entry into the garage for the residents. This is the residential entry here. We have some building services, but this was the entry into up to the courtyard. Our articulation of those areas, we had some concrete proposed, and granted, these are the pre-app, so there wasn't a lot of design work development in there. Our storefront area, this was the entry into what is the residential lobby area, and we have that concrete material, proposed some artwork. And then this was the entry elevation back into our courtyard. The door here, brick, our standard kind of dark brick along in here. So from that meeting, we had comments, concerns about our entry, some issues with that. So for our September 8th hearing, the changes that we made, I know we had comments, questions on the residential, but we want to address kind of all our entry points, because I think you have to talk about all the entry points to understand the project. For the courtyard access up to the work units, we removed some of the building services functions, relocated those to make this more of a gracious area. We know we're going to have bikes coming through, people coming through. There's a building directory signage. So we thought it was important to kind of widen that up a little bit. Still have our ground floor commercial space here. And for the entry back into the residential, we did try and we splayed out this location here and worked in some more landscaping, because we do think that part of any transition from street to where people are coming from, they're going to be doing it at the ground plane. And so we thought that by providing some different paving patterns, texture, landscaping, we could kind of help and reinforce and direct people through and create a nice sort of presence on the street. In terms of from that initial meeting and how we made changes, we have what we proposed for our ground floor space. Maybe there's graphics on the glass. This is 14 foot high, so we have a lot of height here. And we had another option here would be tenant signage on this location. Once again, the building material was still concrete. But then as we move to the actual residential entry, we introduced building signage, the sonder, and then we also took our entry element up to 2 stories and introduced a glazed brick architectural treatment there for that recessed area. We also carried that same material into our courtyard entry location, and where we're then started to introduce the directory for the work units that are up on the courtyard, as well as the building name identification for that courtyard. And one item to note is that on each of these entry locations for the resident and the courtyard, we are proposing some form of public art installation above those areas. This one up here would be directly above and in line with the residential entry. So here was from September 8th. And then we understood there were concerns. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to discuss this with you both, but we did understand the concerns. So our submittal that we made on the 12th, here are the proposals that we made. For the building, we carried that accent glazed brick to the front. We created a smaller building signage name for just the building, the sonder, and we're proposing that this be lit with some of the horizontal bar, low level lighting at that location. We've moved any kind of ground, because we don't know who that tenant is yet. The ground floor tenant signage will either find itself as a graphic on the windows, the door, at least right now. That will get probably flushed out later. But we carried, then moving to the residential entry, we've carried that material all the way. It still comes up in that kind of 2-story space, which, is somewhere around 23 feet high. So it's pretty grand entry. And extend that light bar along there. There'll be some landscape pots along here to kind of help direct that in there. And then maintained that same glazed brick along that courtyard entry, introduce some signage in there, and still have the directory. So then in terms of the ground plane, we've also, what you couldn't see in that, but you'll see in the renderings, is we have a much larger, approximately 14 inches wide by 11 foot high building sign that will go up that vertical face right here. So that vertical sign goes all the way up here. And then in terms of the ground plane, and I realize it's kind of difficult to see, but we've introduced different score patterns, but different also changing concrete finish. So, we carry that through those main areas of entry locations. We are hopeful that there will be, some pedestrian connectivity here with people sitting out there engaging with the street. And so that's part of the reason why we kind of show this here, is that we do think this is going to be very easily read as an entry for the space. We're not trying to commingle entry locations, because in all reality, the residents are going to come through the garage into the building through this door and up the stairs, with, into the mailroom and up. So with potentially very little, coming and going here. So we just wanted to kind of make note of that we certainly don't want to accentuate this entry. But we do recognize that this is going to be a primary entry and exit for the residents. So then this is the sheet that we did submit, that you have hopefully in your packet. So I just wanted to kind of go through those changes on this rendering. Here's that glazed brick material that we've introduced up front on the street, carried around the side, up this 2-story element. Here's the larger sonder signage. This will be low level lighting. And we also, and I'll go back right here in this plan, we also want to introduce low level path lighting at least through these locations and back through here, just because we do anticipate that, especially with some of the, if that courtyard does come online and we are part of that Friday walk, that could extend into, you know, later evening hours, where we want to make sure that that's well lit back through there. And same with the residents. They do have their bike parking back here. So we do anticipate that they would come back here to park their bikes. So there will be some low level lighting through there. But once again, back to this rendering, here's that ground floor commercial space, possibly some signage there, but this is primarily the residential entry transition back in there. This is the entry to the courtyard, to the work units, public art, something happening up there. Here's our garage entry, but there's that, once again, that glazed brick used throughout the building, just at entry locations and our signage. And then just to quickly walk through, you know, this plan sheet. You know, we do have some bike parking up front. We have a lot of bike parking in the back. And then our pavement pattern through there. So there's our revised entry. And, you know, I just want to go back to real quick, the criteria which we have to work with to articulate those entries: architectural treatment, lighting, address identification. You know, I think we showed in our homework that, you know, there are various ways to do that, but in terms of what we've provided, we think we certainly have provided an articulated entry through through the treatment of the building materials, through our landscape, through our paving. We have our signage, addressing, we have lighting. So we, based on the criteria in the code, we believe we have a compliant project that could meet not only the multifamily residential dwelling unit entry criteria, but also non-residential. So with that, it'd be great to have some comments on that before we head into the parking.
Thanks. I appreciate you walking through that. I really think that the effort of what's put forth here and the different techniques that you've used to have, in my mind, really strengthened that connection quite significantly from what we saw before. It still has a little subtlety to it, if you will, but I think that in my mind, it's come a long ways, and yeah, I really appreciate what you've done, because it really does what I think is intended with the code to provide that identity for that element of the mixed use building.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's working really well. As Brett said, you know, some of the additional elements that you're using, you know, we see a ribbon light on the front, but that pulls us around back to the side and kind of gives us a hint that there's something else going on there. The use of colors and that texture, kind of what's modeling as green in your model, you know, that's telling us there's something else going back along the side there. And then with, you know, with your landscape buffer and the neighbor's landscape buffer, as we come along the street front, we're going to see, you know, we're going to see this building from the side and, you know, halfway along the side. So those are pleasing entries. And I think it's great. I think it works well and satisfies what we're looking for.
Okay, great. Okay, so now to the next one. So this is the parking letter that we submitted, and I guess I just want to, because it was a late submittal, we just want to kind of walk through the information. Now, all of this information is found somewhere in all the other submittal information that we provided, but we felt like we needed to at least isolate it and really kind of walk through where we got. And I think at this point, because as we understand it, the design review committee are the ones who are going to make the determination on our non-residential parking requirements. And so I think we would just want to make sure that we can walk through this letter, stop, get some feedback from you both before kind of moving on. I'll just kind of jump into it, but per our design review meeting comments from September 8th, we're providing additional information in regard to the parking demand for the project. We believe this additional information will be useful for the design review committee's evaluation of our project, as Garden City Code does not provide explicit objective parking requirements for mixed-use buildings. In absence of those standards, we did refer to other sections, including the residential parking requirements, while honoring that the code states clearly that alternatives to providing on-site parking are encouraged, and that's Garden City Section 84D-6. So the proposed project, mixed-use project, consists of the following uses: residential units, 10 units, studio 1 bedroom, 4 2 bedrooms, 1 3 bedroom. There are 7 live-work units designed as detached units with a separate workspace. The live units that we have noted are part of those 15 residential units noted above. The 7 work units are between 284 and 356 gross square feet. I put an asterisk there because the numbers that we provided on our sheets, our plan sheets, are slightly higher than what is noted above, because those dimensions took into account the exterior walls, where the gross square foot number for Garden City Code is based on the interior floor area. So that's where the numbers here on this letter are a little bit smaller. The commercial lease space is 554 gross square feet with 307 gross square feet on the second floor for a total of 861 square feet. Parking demand analysis. So the residential portion. For the residential portion of the project, the Garden City Code Section 84D-5 was used for reference to determine the following. The 10 studio 1 bedrooms need 1 car, which equals 10 spaces. The 5 1-bedroom plus need 2 cars, which equals 20 spaces. So total required spaces is 20. So the guest parking. And once again, this is information that we did have in our earlier statement of intent compliance statement letter. Garden City uses a ratio of 1 guest parking for every 2 residential units. This ratio seems excessive based on the mixed use nature of the project and in review of other jurisdictions' development codes for guest parking. Boise City uses 1 guest parking for every 10 units. The city of Meridian also uses 1 guest parking space for 10 units. I did put an asterisk there because the city of Meridian has a vertically integrated residential category for determining parking for residential uses. Vertically integrated residential is defined as the use of a multi-story structure for residential and non-residential uses where the different uses are planned as a unified complementary whole and functionally integrated to share vehicular and pedestrian access and parking. Residential parking for a vertically integrated residential project in Meridian is 1 car park for every dwelling unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms, and no guest parking requirement at all. So if we use Garden City's ratio of 1 to 2, our 15 units require 8 guest parking stalls. If we take Boise City or Meridian, the 1 to 10 requires 2 parking spaces. So I think at this point we want to know, and 2 is what we proposed in our documents for our project. So I think at this point we want to get some feedback on where are we on the guest parking for this project in terms of what we've provided and noted. How do you guys feel about our 1 to 10?
Well, I don't feel that the guest parking is sufficient. I mean, what we're looking at here and what I'm tasked to look at is Garden City's code. And, you know, I do appreciate all the references to all the different codes, but when we've got something that Garden City is saying 8, and there's other alternatives with bicycle parking and such that I can I can see can offset some of that guest parking, not eliminate it, not drop it down to 2 because another jurisdiction thinks it should be 2. So I can't get there with the reduced guest parking that we're talking about here.
And I guess I can, because I'm looking at this more backing up from it and saying this is a mixed use project. And the guest parking is based on residential. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is a mixed use project, and a mixed use parking code is different from a residential code. We have a residential component in a mixed use project, but it's the mixed use parking code that's governing. And so there's that, put that in a little package. And then the other thing that I'm looking at too is, even as we start adding up numbers, we have, X for the residential units, we have X for guests, we have X for commercial. I'm looking at all of that, and then I'm saying, what are the alternatives proposed? So whether or not, however you look at your math and you get to 20, or you get to 47, or you get to 16, however you look at those, I'm then looking at what are the alternatives, because as been mentioned and as is written in the code, alternatives are encouraged. And so what are we encouraging if there's no compensation for that encouragement? So I guess that's how I'm looking at it. Is number one, we're determining it based on mixed use code, and number two, there's alternatives. And as Matt used the word innovative, it's an innovative alternative. It's never been used before, which we've seen 2 in the last 2 hearings. We've seen this car that's specifically designated for this development, and we've seen robotic parking. So obviously people are looking for those alternatives, and if the city's encouraging those alternatives, we should honor that encouragement.
Well, and I wanted to also add that, we did do our homework throughout the start of this project. And I know that the boardwalk did receive a ratio more to the 1:10 or 1:8 for their guest parking. And that was, much bigger development. And then I think that and I can't remember because we've looked at so many applications that have come before you guys. But I think the Cellar and perhaps Casino Beach also were looking at more of a higher, or a more 1:8, 1:10 ratio. So I guess the comment there is that it seems like that has been used for other projects. Granted, those are very much bigger projects than ours. But anyway, I guess I will move on to the next part of our analysis, which gets more into the work and commercial, the non-residential parts of it. So Garden City Code provides no specific direction in regard to determining parking requirements for non-residential uses. Per 84D-5B, non-residential and mixed-use parking requirements are determined by the planning official based on the following criteria. 1, the specific use proposed and or on the property, uses, vicinity of the property, a traffic study prepared forecasting the expected traffic, for the availability of on-street, shared and or public parking within the vicinity of the use, and 5, the availability of public transit, van pooling and other alternative transportation to serve the use. The overall parking code, section 84D-1, has a purpose, and we think that there are 2 purposes that are important to determining appropriate parking requirements for the Sonder mixed-use project. D, to recognize that each development has unique parking needs and to provide for a flexible approach for determining parking space requirements, and E, to provide for parking that is in scale and supports the pattern of compact mixed-use development identified in the city's comprehensive plan. So with the work units, The work units are intended to fill the goals, objectives of the comprehensive plan and live, work, create land use designation. The Searle Mitchell Work, Live, Create Overlay District was created to provide an incentive to implement the comprehensive plan. Though the Sonder did not pursue full compliance with provisions of the district, the code section 8-3C was reviewed during the design of the project. And so here's where we reference section 8-3C-3.G parking. Does provide specific criteria for establishing parking requirements in the district. Once again, this is something where we were trying to break from this text here, trying to review what criteria needed to be reviewed to come up with a number. And even though the code doesn't have anything for non-residential, we at least saw some mention of parking in that area. And number 2 is no off-street parking is required for working spaces less than 500 square feet of interior floor area. So our workspaces were specifically designed to be under that 5-foot limit, and so as to not require any parking for those. So, and we believe this specific criteria can be used to determine requirements per 840, specifically items 1 and 2 of that code section which look at specific uses on the property and uses in the vicinity. In this case, the uses based on the goals, vision for the live, work, land use areas. So with our 7 work units under 500 square feet, we have indicated that there is 0 parking required for those. So I think we would like some comment on that.
Well, I get, in looking at that, I understand, I guess I understand your rationale, but this is not submitted under the live work overlay. And so I guess I feel that the way that the planning official or staff has been calculating what has been required on projects that are not in the overlay is what needs to be looked at. And I guess I can't get to 0 required parking stalls, even with other alternatives. Again, the alternatives there for those units are walking and biking. So yeah,
Walking and biking, and I live upstairs, I'm going to work downstairs. I mean, that's
well, yeah,
I guess
okay.
that's walking, right? But it's your work
But
is at your home.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking to, oh, go ahead, you can finish.
No, go ahead.
Also, just consideration for, it's mentioned in this case, the uses based on the goals and vision of the live, work, create district. I mean, we can't argue this is all but in massing a live, work, create project, right? So I guess we can also look at the uses of also previously approved or in process applications that have used this. So there are other examples, 1 block away and 2 blocks away that have used this math. And then again, if I come back to this is a mixed use project and the mixed use parking is determined by the planning official, not by adding up the numbers that are in other codes, which are in the residential code, so I would imagine the planning official is looking at, this more holistically. And I would say holistically, commercial units under 500 square feet, there's applicable code to look at and determine, yeah, there's other projects that have been submitted and approved that less than 500 square feet doesn't count. This is
Technically, it's
looking like an application that is a live, work, create application. That's how it's presented by the applicant other than the submittal.
Yeah, but if it was, obviously the reasons that it wasn't submitted, if it was submitted under the live, work, create, it wouldn't be the height that is, it wouldn't be, yeah, I mean, there's
Right.
reasons. And so to say that it can have this component while also having this, yet it's not really submitted. I mean, there's just a little bit of a conflict there that I don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable getting to allow this to be considered as the same as when it really isn't the same as.
Right. And on that note, though, it is not the same as 4,000 square feet of one floor of an office building where 15 people or 20 people are going to go to work
Sure.
there, like other projects that are 2 blocks away, right? This is small units for, in part intention to be used by the applicant, the applicants, yes, and also,
Other
you know,
residents.
their neighbors and the people that live there. So, and again, so mixed use, planning official, and then also, again, to say something I said again is like, okay, so let's call it 2. Let's call it 2 guest parking just to put a number on it. At the end of the day, then I'm going to take that number and I'm going to say, what are the alternatives being used that would account for some of that guest parking or account for some of that residential parking? So I'm kind of coming back to the big picture on that. That's my thoughts.
And just want to make one quick note, this number in the Cyril Mitchell code was under 500. I want to point back out that our units, our workspace units are 300 square foot units. A parking stall with a drive aisle is around 300. So these are small spaces, enough for, I imagine a person, an artist to do their work. So it's not, and I think, Derek, you alluded to it, it's not, and I think staff kind of lumped 7 work units into, some larger 3,000 square foot. A 3,000 square foot workspace is a lot different than a 320 square foot workspace or 7 320 foot workspaces. You're not going to have people in there. You're going to have the worker who lives upstairs. So that's where I think we tried our best to help the planning official, the design review committee staff, come up with some reason to grant 0 for our work units. And we understood the Cyril Mitchell code does have parking requirements for work units that are over 500 square feet. So like I said, it was based on use, the comp plan. This is information we had to go with due to lack of any kind of real non-residential parking code section. But so can move on from that to the commercial aspect. The proposed 861 square foot commercial space is intended to serve the residents and neighborhood. To determine appropriate parking demand, we reviewed Boise City and City of Meridian zoning codes. Once again, because Garden City did not have any information, we looked elsewhere nearby. For commercial type uses similar to what is proposed at the Sonder, Boise City uses a unit of measure based on floor area, 1 per 300 gross square foot, or number of seats, 1 per 3 seats. Boise City has 3 parking reduction overlay districts, which are meant to accommodate the need for alternative off-street parking ratios in and around the downtown area based on the needs, primarily within commercial type districts. The reason we put in that note about the parking overlay is because of where we see the Garden City zoning code. We're in a C2 zone. The Garden City comp plan is intending that area to be a little more dense, different types of uses. So that's kind of where we sort of threw that in there. We anticipate the proposed commercial space at the Sonder could have a few seats located within the ground floor. Using these ratios for the Sonder project would result in the following: 861 square foot with the 1 per 300. We round up to 3 cars. If we had 8 seats, 1 per 3 seats, we round up to 3 cars. If we were in Boise City and their P2 overlay and kind of a mid-range, both of those would be reduced to 1 parking requirement, whether we have seats or gross square footage. City of Meridian requires 1 space for every 500 gross square feet in commercial districts, regardless of the type of use. Using this ratio, the Sonder project would result in the following: round up, we would need 2 spaces. We understand Garden City historically has historically required at least one parking space for every 500 gross square feet of commercial space in the live work overlay. Using this ratio would require the following: 1 per 500, we would round up to 2 spaces. So I guess in terms of this analysis, can we get some feedback on that? 2 spaces?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the calculation there with the 300, 1 car per 300 square feet is typically what staff has done for commercial space in Garden City. So the 3 spaces, does it qualify? There's no overlay. I mean, does it qualify for a reduction? I guess holistically, again, there's room for reduction, but quantifying that is the part that I just am not of what that reduction is. I mean, when you start looking at what's provided in the reduction, it's almost as if the number of parking spaces for people that are visiting this mixed use project are what is lacking. Even if I could get there with the rationale with some reduction in the number of cars for the residential component, it's just there's a number of people that are going to be coming to visit the residences. There's going to be people coming to visit the live workspaces, even though they live there, that are working there. I think that's still going to see a certain amount of traffic, and that's the reason for that as a commercial type space. And then you're going to see commercial spaces for that one commercial unit on the street frontage. And I feel that it's too reduced in the amount of parking for the size of the building and all those components. So I can't get there.
I do want to note that I've let this kind of go on, and we are way out of any sort of alignment with Robert's rules at this point in time, or our hearing procedures. I do appreciate that there's been some great presentation by the applicant, as well as discussion by the committee members. But I would like to note that as standard, the applicant should have 15 minutes for their presentation, and then it's turned over to staff and then back to the committee members after the public hearing for discussion. And for the sake of those that we have here in the audience and online today, I'd like to bring this conversation back to being in order. And applicant, if you'd be willing to finish up any application presentation that you have, and then we can turn it over to the staff.
Yeah, apologies for running late here. I think that since this is one issue that there's been discussion on, and we haven't really had much discussion on, but we've heard that we're insufficient, we felt we needed to walk through that. So I'll quickly go through, our conclusion came up with a total of 24 spaces. And I can go back through and note that project at 35th and Clay, their parking ratio was 1 per close to 500. That was before they turned into a restaurant with 56 seats, where that parking was not changed at that time. But in regard to the other section of the code for alternatives to on-site parking, off-street parking, here's kind of where we end up. We think that our car share provides a reduction of 5 parking spaces. I think we need to have feedback from the planning official, the design review committee, on if we are going to, if they are in agreement with that. We believe that the 2 guest parking, or the 8, if that's what Garden City believes it needs to be, or can be provided on the street or in the available parking lot around the corner. We've identified 0 working for the workspaces and the commercial. And I think we just wanted to note up here real quick that the Garden City Code allows for, encourages providing alternatives to on-site off-street parking. Submitted with our application was a parking study with access to trans and other forms of transportation are identified in the code, all of which are viable options for the Sonder. We will utilize a car share program available to residents. And there's also the public parking lot. There's additional parking. We've overparked this with bike parking. We're on a transportation corridor. We have the Greenbelt ride hailing services. So bottom line, we believe our project is sufficiently parked.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant?
None at this time.
Thank you. Staff, do you have anything to add that would have changed from the last hearing?
I do not have anything additional to add. Today's discussion was pretty extensive of what I would say. I just would defer to my staff report and any comments in there.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? Is there
No.
anybody who wishes to provide additional testimony? And we would request that it be tailored to new evidence that's been provided.
I would, yes.
Could you please spell your name?
Kate,
Laura?
Kate, Falkenstein, Falkenstien.
Thank you.
Can I go ahead?
And please.
Okay, thanks so much. So I think Ms. Sewell's presentation is telling because it picks and chooses between a bunch of different codes, depending on what suits them at different points, whether it's the overlay district, where they don't comply with the height requirements, the Meridian City Code, the Boise City Code, certain subsections of the Boise City Code. And even then, after all of that tinkering, they get to a number of parking spaces, 24, that they still don't meet. I want to address specifically this idea about the car sharing alternative because I listened closely at the last hearing to Mr. Hurd's comments, and I understand that he wants to encourage alternatives and is somewhat persuaded by the car sharing, but I have 4 key questions I want to raise that I haven't heard an answer to, even though I raised them in my letter if it's already in the public record. My first question is, who manages this car? Who will buy it, clean it, maintain it, register it? Who insures it? If it gets into a crash, who's liable? How do people who live in the building get access to the car? Can they reserve specific times in advance, or do they have to just hope for the best that when they have an appointment that they need to go to, the car happens to be available? There are established services, things like Zipcar, but my understanding is that these people intend to create something new and that Mr. Hurd's been very focused on the novelty, that it'll be a car just for this building, somehow run by this building. But that raises a lot of logistical questions that I just haven't heard any engagement with. When the car is the only basis for deviating by more than 50% from the standard requirements, those questions need answers. My second question is, how do we ensure the car will be available into the future? I don't know if there's some plan to make this a contingent requirement for approving this building, that the car has to be available, but I haven't heard anything to that effect. And even if it is a requirement, there's no way to enforce it once the building is built without any parking. If this family is planning to operate the car themselves, but someday they move away or they find that the car isn't used that much and they don't want to offer it anymore, or anything that might happen in the distant future, you've built a permanent building that simply doesn't have enough parking, but there's no way to ensure the car share will still be there. My third question is, how does this car share address the shortage of parking for people who aren't residents? As has been discussed at length, there's requirements for guests, for the workers in the offices, which I note are not required to be residents of the building, even though they could agree to such a requirement if they actually intended to enforce it. The parking for the coffee shop workers, the parking for the coffee shop customers. Even using the cobbled together version of the code that comes from a bunch of different cities, different codes, there's still some parking required for these people, and they presumably don't have access to the shared car. Indeed, watching the presentation today, it's not clear to me that they have access to the parking garage at all, which is behind a grill according to the drawings that Ms. Sewell showed and which she repeatedly said would be primarily for the residents. It seems the intention is that the garage might be private and all uses by office workers and coffee shop workers would be pushed onto the street. At a minimum, the shared car does nothing to address the needs of those people because they don't have access to it. And under the proper code that applies without all these exceptions, just the parking for people like the guests, the office workers, and the coffee shop exceed what they're offering. So the shared car as an alternative, no matter how much you value it, can't outweigh the need for all these other uses that don't have access to the shared car. And finally, my fourth question is, what does the evidence say about car sharing? As you might have seen in my written comment, I went and found the study that Mr. Clark mentioned at the last hearing, which came from San Francisco. I think there's some real problems with relying on this study at all, because it's not the same situation. It was a study of what happens when people join and pay for car sharing programs like Zipcar. So you know those people actually want to use car sharing because they chose to pay for it, unlike people who might just happen to live in a building that happens to have this car or not necessarily bought into it. There's also a study in a much more urban area, that is San Francisco. But let's set all that aside and take it at face value. What the study found was that when people join a car sharing program, there's a 50% reduction in the number of cars that they own. If we applied that same thing here to the code, you would take the 20 places for the residents and take it down to 10, which isn't nearly enough of a decrease to make up for the shortage in parking. This study is the only evidence in the record about the effects of car sharing, which is not entirely untested. It has been studied. And even taking the best case scenario, it's simply not enough. I think healthy development is good, but healthy development has adequate parking. The only alternative is for the city and the taxpayers to end up footing the bill when the street parking is gone and we have to build private lots. And I think it's telling that in the rebuttal of the last hearing, that's exactly what Ms. Sewell suggested, that if the street parking ran out, the city could simply build lots. I don't think the city and the taxpayers should have to pay for the externalities of a profitable business that the developers want to build. I'm all for them building it, but they should have to pay for the costs that come with it out of the profit that they'll make from building it. That's the best way to ensure healthy development in the long term. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Wolkenstein? All right, is there anybody else who wishes to provide testimony? Ms. Isley, if you wouldn't mind stating your name for the record.
My name is Belinda Isley, and I live across the street from the proposed apartment building. I would really like to thank Design Review for the thought and the care that you're putting into this application. I really do appreciate it. It's really an important, will be an important building. And it needs to be properly parked. I'm in favor of high density development. It's good for the environment. High density uses existing infrastructure. It avoids urban sprawl. It helps support the development of mass transit. However, as a Garden City resident, I just find so many flaws in this application. First of all, I feel the courtyard does not seem obvious that it is open to the public. And I find a problem with that, because that's one of the key components of this, is that this space is open to the public. It's not obvious to me that it's open to the public. I think it needs to have a lot of signage that says very clearly that it's open to the public. And there were a lot of things I wanted to say that the last person talked about, but at the last minute meeting, when Ms. Sewell said that when Garden City ran out of street parking, that they could pay to build more street parking. As a resident of Garden City, I was kind of offended by that comment, because I am the city, and arguably everyone at this meeting, with the exception of the architect and the applicants, are probably residents of the city. And as a resident of Garden City, I don't really want my taxes raised to pay to build parking lots because of developments that did not provide adequate parking in the first place. Also, new information that Ms. Sewell showed us. I can't get my head around that they are picking and choosing from different codes. I mean, the major square footage of this project is residential. It is residential. They said they conducted a series of parking studies within a 2-block radius of the property. I sent Hanna a photograph earlier today that I took on a Thursday in August, and there is absolutely no parking on 35th that you can see. So I don't think maybe she can put that into the notes, but they didn't take into consideration also that there are several really large scale developments that have been approved already that will also be using on-street parking, that will also be using that public parking lot that's right around the corner. when they're finished, all the on-street parking is going to be even more difficult. So it's so important that each new development, as it comes online, be required to adequately park the residents of their buildings. And I think any reasonable person would realize that 15 apartments, their visitors, 7 offices, and a coffee shop are going to draw many more than 16 cars to the area. And to mitigate this, they have this car share idea. It's just not a viable alternative to offset the parking deficiency. I did some research on car sharing, and the only studies I could find were done in major cities like San Francisco. And these services, you get a car instantly when you need it, and you can have it for an hour or an entire weekend. I could find no evidence about the effects of car sharing on car ownerships in less dense areas like Garden City, especially one car shared in a whole entire building that will realistically have at least 20 and most likely more driving adults. So if car sharing is really the main reason why this apartment building that you're thinking it can be allowed to have real deficient parking, then you really need to ask more questions about how it will work and ensure that it's a permanent feature of this building. I'd also like to address the offices. The application states that the lease spaces are intended to be used for home offices or businesses for the residents occupying the structure, so they don't have to commute. But the developers are not requiring that those are used by the residents. So there's no reason to believe that these offices will be rented exclusively to residents. And if the city approves the project with no conditions attached to those offices, and the developers use their flexibility to rent the offices to non-residents, then there are probably 7 additional cars that are going to need to park. Whether you're an artist or whether you're an one horse accountant, you're still going to have people come and visit you and need your services. So as much as I appreciate your time and energy on this, and I must say, I really do like the new design elements and the entryways that Ms. Sewell and the applicants have proposed. I really do appreciate those and like them. I think you've hit the nail on the head with those. But I would ask the committee to deny this application as it stands and require the apartment building to supply adequate parking as allowed by the code and common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Isley? Is there anyone else who wishes to provide testimony on this matter? Seeing none. Oh, Mr. Jones,
Oh, sorry.
please state your name for the record.
Jason Jones, 208 East 33rd Street, Garden City, Idaho. So I testified last time, and just to reiterate, I mean, this is clearly a mixed use project. And I know Brett is kind of, even in Brett's discussion, I can hear that we're where we need to be, which is he can't get to the parking. And the truth is he shouldn't have to. Garden City has been aware since they've had a judgment against them earlier this year that they have to have explicit standards for parking. This, as a mixed use project, falls under the mixed use code for parking, and there are not explicit standards. And so Garden City can't use parking as a way to deny this project, period. And I think the fact that Brett's going, hey, I can't quite get there, I can't justify this reduction. The truth is, where the city has a reduction of parking, they should have an explicit stated number of parking spaces that are reduced, and they don't have that. And so it's up to people to just guess. And so it puts the design review committee in a bad spot because they're trying to guess what that parking reduction should be. But Idaho law says they shouldn't have to guess. And so that's really, I think, the crux of the issue that I hear here is that we're talking about parking code, and the parking code doesn't actually exist. And it's not just that the parking code for the non-residential doesn't exist. This falls under mixed use. And so it doesn't even fall under the residential code. So the fact that the planning official is determining that they're going to even look at the residential code to park the residential component of this doesn't meet Idaho law, because a judge has already said that the planning official doesn't get to arbitrarily go, oh, we're going to use this for this if it's not written into code. And the code doesn't say for mixed uses, residential parking standards will be applied to the residential component. It could say that if that's what the city wanted it to be, but it doesn't actually say that. And so again, I think if the city denies this project based on simply what it sounds like parking, that it will be overturned by a judge again. And so I would love to see maybe Charlie, I see Charlie's here, weigh in so that there's some sense in either, after this project does get approved, because it will have to get approved, whether it's by design review or the city council being forced to approve it, or by a judge overturning this again. The city's going to have to fix that code so that there are explicit standards for parking for all non-commercial and mixed use projects. And, it would just make sense to go ahead and have Charlie weigh in now and say, look, we don't actually have a way to deny this project based on parking. There's no way that can happen, so that it's not putting the design review committee in such a bad position to try to have to look at it and justify reducing parking by some random number that's arbitrary, where we're going, hey, we have to, it doesn't meet residential parking code, even though this isn't a residential project, it is mixed use. And the planning official going, well, we've done this with other projects. Again, the judge's specific statement was, you don't get to decide that after the fact. You don't get to decide it on a case by case basis. You don't get to look at prior projects and go, well, this is how we did it for this other one. The fact that the code doesn't exist doesn't meet Idaho law. And if you deny it based on your code that doesn't meet the law, I think, like I said, this should be appealed to a judicial review again, and there's no chance that Garden City can actually defend that position. So that's my testimony.
All right, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Jones? Anyone else that wishes to provide testimony? And again, if you do wish to provide testimony, please do tailor it, your comments to not be reiterative of comments that are in the record already. Anyone else wishing to provide testimony? All right, thank you. I'll turn this back over to the applicant team for any rebuttal.
Thank you. First, I guess a question about if the design review committee has different, like if it's a tie, what's the protocol for how we move forward? That was touched on last week, but I don't know that we have an answer for that. Just but so I want to deal with some of these other things because there were some good and important questions about the car share program. This won't be a third party like zip car situation. The car will be owned and operated by the building, insured by the building, managed by the building. And there are some property management software suites out there that have added modules for shared car management available to the tenant. So you get your login and you can reserve it for an hour to go run to the grocery store on Thursday afternoon. And then someone else isn't gonna, can look online and know that time's not available. I'm going to plan to go to the grocery store at 6 o'clock or whatever it is. So there are some good tools out there for that. We do believe that by choosing to live in this building and paying for enrollment in this car share program, that that's what we're looking for, is people who want to join this kind of a project with a reduced car ownership footprint, including ourselves. As a reminder, this is not, we're currently owners of the property in Garden City and will be residents of the property in Garden City as soon as it's built. Bree, were there other things that you wanted to touch on?
Oh, just,
Oh,
yeah.
that we'd be happy to make the car share the existence of the car share a conditional use of the project.
To Kate's point about.
Yeah,
how
like
did
it's
we
not going
know
to
we'll keep
vanish.
it? Yeah.
For whatever, I'm happy to do that. It's very much part of the design, and we have no intention of taking it away. We want to be using it as well. And we think it's an important new tool for allowing a lower footprint. The option to adding more parking to this project would mean adding another 2 levels of parking garage. Because the ramp required, we worked on this early on to see if by doing a 2-level parking garage, we could get more spots in. And because of ramps, you actually lose so much square footage that we'd have to do a 3-story parking garage in order to increase the parking on site. So we've approached this by trying to limit the number of units to match the number of parking spots that we can fit on the main level, creating the car share program and all of the other pedestrian bike friendly elements of the plan.
Yeah, and just to, I think, touch on Jason's point too, the reason for looking at all of the code sections in all of the neighboring cities is because there, was an actual code governing our project. There's no objective calculation, no objective parking requirement, but this, like, reviewing, as I think Kate said, picking and choosing, like, we're highlighting our rationale for why our project is designed the way it is, just in a good faith effort to meet the code that we do see, and to talk through our intended uses, and to talk through what's going on nearby. So yeah, I guess that's it for us. And then I just want to touch back on what is the protocol like, where do we go from here? It kind of seems like, Brett was saying we can't quite get there. And I know Derek has said, let's do something concrete as encouragement with the, an innovative alternative and the additional alternatives to on-site parking. So I guess, like, what does that actually look like? Like, what does that encouragement look like? How might you guys reduce the parking? And if you two can't agree or don't agree, what is the protocol for moving the project forward?
We would hope to get a decision today, one way or another, so that we can move forward with
Yeah.
the process. Obviously, we see the prior application in front of you guys for so long, and we really have done our best to respond to the needs and get us ready to move forward. So
I just want to make one quick comment. The car share is for the residents only. It's not intended to be used by any of the ground floor commercial space. So we are parked 1 per every resident, and then we're asking for the car share to count for the additional 5 that we recognize are needed for the residential parking situation. The guest parking and the work parking, or the commercial space, we believe, based on our study and the intensity of the use, which we think is low, because we're there to serve either the residents who live there for workspace or the neighbors in the area, which is growing, as everyone has mentioned, all the large scale development, that is such a small need for parking that it can be accommodated on the streets or in the adjacent public parking lot around the corner. And I do want to address the comment that I made at the previous hearing about that Garden City residents should pay for parking garages. My comment was more directed at the comp plan and the Garden City's vision to bring people to the city, to the Greenbelt, to the water park, to art functions, to This Cummings Flipside Music Festival. Those types of uses cannot be parked by developers. They cannot be parked by other types of uses. So the city had indicated that satellite parking areas may be needed at some point in time. That's all that I was commenting on there. I was not saying that everybody in Garden City should take care of parking situations for projects. I just think there's people coming to your town and there's no place for them to park because the developers are not anticipating bringing their bikes to the Greenbelt to get on and go for a ride and enjoy the river. Anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant team? And before I turn it over to discussion, I'll just reiterate that if the committee is unable to have a second on a motion, then the motion will die. And this item would be heard by the city council in that situation. And then one other thing before I turn it over to discussion, just to clear up something that was stated on the record. I quickly looked at design review fiscal year 2018, number 4, the 405 building that was referenced for the 30 units. That application document noted 62 spaces that were provided. And with that, I turn it over to the committee for discussion. Any further discussion? What is that?
So I guess it sounds like as far as items at issue, there may be only one item at issue anymore. Is that right, Brett? Like the entry facade, entry prominence, has that been satisfied?
Yes.
Okay, great.
I
So
feel
as far as motions and moving forward, and potentially you have a motion that doesn't get a second and I have a motion that doesn't get a second and it goes to city council, that's kind of the issue at hand, and that's potentially what they're looking at as far as kind of their why did this even come to us without an approval? That's what they're looking at, I would imagine.
I would
And I
agree
think,
with that.
yeah, and I think since, typically there's a motion, there's a second, and then there's discussion, and we may not have a second. Maybe we just, kind of, I know where you're coming from, and I guess I want to reiterate where I'm coming from. And I think what's interesting too is I looked at, actually made kind of where are they and where are they coming from? And it was really interesting because as I grabbed pieces of reference for myself, I had yet to read the applicant's architect's kind of introductory letter of here's where we're at and here's what we're looking at. And then I happened to read that in another review when I went back to this, and I was like, oh, this is where I came from and how I came to my decision. And this is what the applicant's architect, where they've come from and how they've made their decision. And so I guess kind of in summary, I agree with where they're coming from. And then to speak kind of to some of the things that have mentioned in the process today, it was mentioned by a couple of members of the public that this car share is the only thing that I'm looking at. And I was so fascinated by it because it's new. That is absolutely true. It's new, it's innovative, it's unprecedented. And that should be acknowledged because the code asks for us to encourage those types of things. So when something comes along that is new and unprecedented and innovative, let's bring that to the forefront, because let's just say, what if this is a new thing that most every developer does? This is a wonderful thing that most every developer could do and maybe should do. So we have to acknowledge that. And then another thing that was talked about, and I think Matt summed it up in saying, yes, there's absolutely an agreement that says this car share program continues with the life of the development. How I had looked at that is in the same way that under the standards in 84D6, under the standards for alternative site parking, when there's off-site parking agreement, that is all built in and boiled into the codes, not the codes, the CC&R and the HOA and, deed restrictions in essence of the development. So I had looked at it in that way, and I would have, conditioned this, and I would condition this in a way that is built in there, so that doesn't go away when this property changes hands, or it doesn't go away when, something else changes. I mean, in a great world, then two of the spaces become car share because it is so popular. And then the commercial tenants do get to use it and the neighbors get to use it. And then there's a pickup truck because we need to go to Lowe's, right? So, I mean, those are the kind of things that if we're going to encourage this, spurs change and spurs growth and spurs creativity and ingenuity. So I think that's where I'm coming from. And then it was also mentioned as far as, you know, these different code references, not only with Garden City, within Garden City code, but also within Meridian and Boise. And that was presented by some of the neighbors as a negative thing. And I saw that as a positive thing because we are given mixed use code and there's no, you know, there's no defined number in the mixed use code that we're looking at for parking. So we have to go elsewhere for those things. So I thought it was a great summary of here's an example of this, here's an example of that, because we don't have direct references and direct guidance that says use this number right here this time. So that's where I'm coming from. And with that, I would make a motion to approve this as conditioned, as I've mentioned, with the parking that's been proposed by the applicant and as drawn by the applicant with their most recent revisions.
Thank you. Is there a second on that motion? All right, hearing none, is there an alternative motion? All right, hearing none, we will notice this for a city council hearing. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you.
We appreciate your time.
And then last but not least, one more public hearing that we have on the agenda today, and thank you everyone for your patience, is subdivision fiscal year 2022 number 5. Nicolette Womack is requesting a new construction of a townhome subdivision located at 8373 West Chinden Boulevard. And it looks like. Do we have the applicant here? Oh, in the audience.
Right
Yeah.
where you're at.
Do you need help? I think I know where it is. Thank you.
We have a memo from Jessica.
And then do we share screen? Yeah. Commissioners, thank you for having us tonight. We will try to keep this concise. We appreciate your time here tonight. The project before you is Coffee Townhomes at the intersection of Coffee and Chinden Boulevard. And the applicant on the building side is D.R. Horton. So the full applicant team is shown here just for conciseness. Mark Russell from SRG Holdings and Fromley Development is the landowner. Andy is with D.R. Horton, who was on virtually tonight. I am with Kimley Horn as a planner, and Abby and Kelly are engineers with Kimley Horn. I'll turn it over to Andy for a minute.
Thank you, Nicolette. My name is Andy Tiemann. I'm Director of Forward Planning and I work for D.R. Horton. We are a national home builder. And since 2002, more home buyers have chosen D.R. Horton than any other national builder. We've delivered over 890,000 homes to our customers since our company's inception. We operate in 44 of home building's top 50 markets in the US and rank among the top 5 in 35 of these markets. Our team of experts are spread across the nation in 32 states and 102 markets. And we're excited to be in the Boise area and looking forward to showing our architecture later in the presentation.
The process to get here today started back in March of this year, where we came for a DRC pre-application meeting. We held our internal staff pre-application meeting in June, and then our neighborhood meeting later that month. In July, we formally submitted, and that brings us to Planning and Zoning Commission this Wednesday and tonight with DRC. Again, the project is west of Chinden and Glenwood, and is 7 acres. The project, it's important to know, it does hit the intersection of Coffee and Chinden. However, on the south side, rear side of it is a Thurman drain. And then there's a 50-foot grade change between the parcel that is at Chinden Street level and the subdivision to the rear. And that is the bench, as most people know it. This is the layout of our project. Again, 7 acres in size, 76 single family units. So these are attached townhomes, but they are for sale. They are 3 bedrooms. And the overall density is 10.59 dwelling units per acre. And that averages out to about a 40% building lot coverage, which we know is noted in the comprehensive plan. Regarding parking, this will be short and sweet, but we meet the parking requirements, and that includes guest parking as well. Happy to talk about it. For open space, it was noted in the report wanting some more clarity about what is considered qualified open space in the code. So the code requires 10%, and we exceed that with 16% open space. The qualified open space on the diagram in your packet is the hatched area on this plan. So that is about 1.13 acres in total. This is a rendering of the central amenity, the central open space area. And then just to explain our layout further, we have a variety of 4-plex and 6-plex buildings, and this is where Andy will take back over again.
All right, thank you, Nicolette. If you could go to the next slide, thank you. So this is a 4-plex showing our A and B units. The architectural style is farmhouse here, and the building materials we're looking at are horizontal and vertical siding, along with some stone veneer and some shake siding as well. And these are a color scheme as an example of a number of color schemes we'll use throughout the community. I'm sorry, that was the Craftsman. This is the farmhouse elevation that we're proposing. Similar horizontal and vertical siding materials with stucco as well on this as this structure is. Next slide is showing our 6-plex. Basically showing the A and B, and then also the C unit, showing the front, rear, and side elevations of our homes. Another 6-plex showing our farmhouse elevation, front, rear, and side elevations. And our floor plan, so we have 3 different units. Our livable square footages are listed here on the table. About 13 to 1,400 square feet. And then with the garage and porches, we're ranging from 1,600 to almost 1,900 square feet. The A unit is the exterior end unit, and the B and C would be our interior units that we are proposing. Here are some examples of the interior finishes that we would be proposing and building at this community. This is for the A unit, and this is an example for the B unit. And then we have additional pictures showing the C unit. And so unit variation, so site location. So we're looking at different price points with each product, each living unit. So when the site location will mean more like lot premium. So for example, the interior unit facing the highway would be priced different than an interior unit facing Thurman Canal or internal to the open space area. And so we will have different price points by each unit, and also different price points depending on the location of that unit We're also providing variety with interior and end units. And then patio sizes will also vary between the units. And then the facade treatments. So we, like I showed earlier, there's different facade treatments that we're proposing with siding. We'll also have multiple color schemes as well throughout the community. And then something else that I just want to touch base on is the livability of these homes. They really feel like a single family home, and they're very popular. We've built a number of these homes in many markets, and they're well received. It's a very it hits a very wide demographic of lifestyles that we're seeing, and people just love them. You know, it's single people, young married couple, young family, empty nesters. We're just getting a very wide variety of homeowners that just love these homes, and it's been a trend for us also because being single family attached, it feels like a single family home, but it also provides maintenance that people are looking to not have to do on their home anymore. So it's a great home for people. And then also, you know, we're faced with affordability, right? So we're trying to make these homes as affordable as possible, and this architecture style really helps with that affordability. And then also in the staff report, it mentioned buildings 7 and 14 on the site elevation. What we proposed was a standard site elevation. So we recognize the comments, and so we've prepared this enhanced site elevation for building 7 and 14, you know, making the entry on the side so it has a nice front facade along Coffee Street. Nicolette, would you like to take on?
So we know that we're required to provide 6 sustainability points. So on our site, we do have the multi-use pathway on Chinden. We showed it earlier, but didn't hit on it for very long. But basically, there will be a 10-foot pathway on our site along the whole Chinden frontage. And then there will be sidewalk as well, detached sidewalk on Coffee, greatly enhancing the pedestrian connectivity and network in this area, which is currently, I believe, just nothing at this point. So we'll also have an easily accessible recycling area for another point, and on-site stormwater infiltration and retention system. And then again, we have submitted our review to ITD for some time now. They are committing to providing their comments by October 3rd. It's important to note in the traffic impact study, though, that access to Chinden better distributes the trips and the project overall. Performing it, that makes it function better overall, but it's actually recommended by fair peers that we keep the Chinden access. However, should access be denied or restricted to right in, right out, or emergency only with ITD, then the existing access on Coffee is sufficient, and we'll be able to react on the site plan. And again, we just recommend we request your recommendation of approval of the design review permit. We'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Volnick. And Mr. Timon, any questions for the applicant team? Right, thank you.
Not at this time.
And now we'll hear a report from Hanna Veal.
Good afternoon, or I guess evening at this point. So this proposal is subdivision fiscal year 2022-0005 Coffee Townhomes. It is a proposal that consists of 76 2-story 3-bedroom townhomes with access off of West Chinden and Coffee Street. The proposal intends to keep the existing Thurman Mill ditch untiled and maintains the surrounding dense vegetation to the south. The application proposes a code compliant 183 vehicular parking spaces, and it is to be processed as a planned unit development. As a planned unit development, the applicant can submit waivers to code standards standards such as minimum setbacks to allow for the 0-foot interior side setbacks of the townhomes, for allowing a greater number of lots to be accessible off of a common drive, since code only allows for 4 in a subdivision, and a waiver for the proposed non-compliant parking space dimension sizes. However, the applicant has only formally requested one of these waivers, which is to allow for that 0-foot side setback for the townhome units. Staff has drafted the other 2 waivers in the condition document and the approval. A section of planned unit development code requires that any development that which proposes 10 or more dwelling units shall provide a variety of housing types. Now, code says that the proposed variety shall include attached units such as townhomes and duplexes, detached units such as patio homes, and single family or multifamily units. So the overall density, while the overall density of the district is maintained, so for that planned unit development. The application does not propose a variety of housing types, and that all of the units that are proposed are 2-story townhomes of similar architectural design. The townhomes, while appearing similar in exterior elevations, do provide a variety of 3-bedroom floor plans ranging from 1,674 square feet to 1,887 square feet. Please note that during the January 19th, 2021 meeting, the Design Review Committee discussed the criteria related to the requirement of a variety of housing to be provided when utilizing the planned unit development ordinance. The Design Review Committee reviews architectural variety, design, and aesthetics, whereas the Planning and Zoning Commission reviews the variety of housing types, such as multifamily, townhome, single family, etc. During the April 18th, 2022 Design Review Committee pre-application conference, the committee requested for the site design to include more variety in heights and densities within this subdivision. Their comments suggested increasing the height of the structures adjacent to West Shinden. And not only would it add or aid in breaking up the long roof lines of the proposed townhomes, but it would also be in conformance with the mixed use commercial future land use designation of the comprehensive plan. The mixed use commercial future land use designation is meant to be more of a mixed use, so residential and commercial, and ultimately more urban in character, where 3-story buildings with lot coverages of up to 40 to 60% is achieved. Density might become an issue when considering the traffic impact study. The Idaho Transportation Department has yet to review and officially comment on the traffic impact study. So access might become limited to West Shinden, depending on what ITD has said. However, as the applicant, Nicolette, has provided today a late submittal to which ITD has confirmed official comments by October 3rd. And then as far as the staff report analysis goes, I just would like to dive a little bit deeper into some of the comments that were provided. So if we looked at Garden City Code 84B3, the staff report goes into detail to those frontages of building 7 and building 14, where those end units do not address the adjacent coffee street. It looks like the applicant has attempted to acknowledge this staff report comment today in their presentation. So further discussion and possibly analysis would be required. Additionally, there appears to be a lack of street frontage trees. So while the application is providing that 10-foot wide required multi-use pathway there along Chinden Boulevard, it still appears that there are not necessarily, there's only one tree that is deficient. So it would easily be conditioned in the decision document to require an additional class 2 or 3 street tree and coordination with staff. However, along Coffee Street, it appears that there might be a deficiency of street trees between the Coffee Street right of way and the sidewalk. And that could just be because the landscape plans might inadequately represent the sidewalk along Coffee Street. It looks like there might still be some coordination with ACHD regarding that public right-of-way sidewalk. But Garden City Code would require that there are street trees within that 6 or 8 foot wide landscape buffer. And then lastly, I have some comments regarding the common open space, just simply in that there has been identification of the common open space, but not exact calculations to see if the spaces that were calculated in the overall calculation or total of that common open space would count towards the requirements. Since Garden City Code 8.4L does have specific dimensional standards to meet those requirements, staff just asks that there be a common open space map given or provided to confirm that the common open space is actually there and meets those dimensional requirements. And with that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Ms. Veal. Any questions for the staff report?
No, thanks, Hannah.
I had just one quick one. I don't know if there's conflicting documentation as well, or not, but are the street trees travel side of the multi-use path along Chinden?
They are back of that multi-use pathway, not between Chinden and
Thank you.
the pathway.
Thank you. Now we'll go ahead and open this item to public comment. There was no one signed up, but is there anybody that wishes to provide public testimony on this matter? If you're on Zoom, go ahead and raise your hand or just speak up if you're wishing to provide testimony. All right. Looks like no one is here that wishes to provide testimony. Ms. Womack.
Thank you. We appreciate staff's thorough analysis. We know they have a lot on their plate, and so we want to do our best to use our time wisely with you all tonight. So going through the project, it seemed beneficial on the previous project to look through each item that's been left in yellow on the project report. So 8.4B3 discusses the need for improved modulation and entrance features on building 7 and 14. So as we've shown here, we agree to those conditions and have no issues. On page 14 of the staff report, where it discussed 8.4E5 private street standards, this project actually is more of a service drive and not actually a private street. So this is more typical of maybe an apartment community and a commercial facility. So we are happy to accommodate the larger section if needed, but this should be sufficient. And then moving forward to page 15, 8.414 landscaping provisions for specific uses. We are happy to provide those additional trees, no problem. And as you can see on our site plan here, which may not have made it into the review staff report, we are happy to work through providing those additional trees. And we do have street trees on Coffee and Chinden Boulevard. The next one is 8.417 tree preservation provisions. We'll continue working with staff on code allowances. We did provide a tree mitigation plan, which we actually have here in backup for you. So this is a big site and there's a lot of existing trees in questionable shape. But we were required to provide to mitigate 409 inches, caliper inches, and we have replaced 229 on site. So we're running out of places to put trees on this site, and especially with the existing canal easement, which we are trying to keep as natural as possible. So we're happy to keep working with staff on alternative compliance. Just go back to that other one. The next one was on open space 84L4. This is the exhibit that became late correspondence in your packet. Again, the areas highlighted with the hatch marks are 16% qualified open space, meeting those detailed standard requirements on what can count. And then 85A6 improvement standards. There was question about if we had enough variety, and we feel that there's a lot being built in Garden City right now at the 3-story level. This is a unique product in the community that does reach in a more affordable price point, and there will be variations. So typically in other developments in Garden City, we're talking about a lot smaller of an area. So on this size of a site, you do see a lot of price variation between what is located and fronting with a more personable yard area on Chinden versus what is buffered from Chinden and against the Thurman drain, and then what is interior to the site. And then again, in the townhome style product, there is a lot of price variation between how many walls you share neighbors with. So the end units will have different price points than the interior units overall. Also in that section was an easement for the multi-use pathway, 12 feet wide, and then the actual physical pathway is 10 feet wide. So we have provided that on our site. We'll keep working with ITD to make sure that ends up in the right location. And although the waivers were not noted in the request, we do request those clearly and are look forward to hearing your feedback on that. So that's 86B7 planned unit development. And I believe that's all the items highlighted in yellow, and we'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Womack?
So just one quick clarification, and you may have touched on it, but just to reiterate it, the common space areas is or is not including the Thurman drain kind of
Is
wild
not.
space. Okay,
It's
great.
not,
Thank
yeah,
you.
just areas with the hatches on this.
Thanks.
Right, I do have one, and forgive me if it's clearly in the packet, but the location of the trees on Chinden, can you remind us why they're back of sidewalk?
Thank you. So working with ITD, that was the location that they discussed with us. So the sidewalk and improvements being back a sidewalk. But as we get comments, if there's ability to move that forward, we'll certainly discuss it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Right, thank you very much.
Thanks.
We'll close the public hearing and open it up for discussion.
Well, I'll start with just initial comment on, seems like this, we keep coming around to this, the issue with the response to the street frontage and end type units. And it always, I guess, always in my mind, seems like there's large, greatly missed opportunity for the end units that aren't abutting a neighboring building to be able to really have some different treatment on those to gain, more fenestrations in that facade that's fronting the street, brings more natural light into the space, makes a much more attractive unit, and really provides a presence on the street, not just shifting the entry around and having, now we've got an entry on a side elevation because we haven't really looked at those the fenestrations, or maybe even flipping some spaces around in there, and just, I mean, taking advantage of the fact that this is an end unit. And that can also greatly enhance how this feels as you're traveling through the interior of this, if you're thinking about some of those end unit spaces that could take advantage of having that and expressing itself. And in my mind, that plays in as part of the role of providing, architecturally and aesthetically a variety of different types of housing units in those treatments, those facade treatments that kind of distinguish and give some different identity to as you're moving through from building to building. Having just the repetition of the same building unit with a little bit of a different color treatment, some different maybe more corbelline, so to speak, or more detail on one than the other. I just don't feel that is enough that kind of gets that aspect of providing a variety in the overall aesthetic. And then, I think we touched on this to start with. There's a real opportunity here in that initial meeting. The opportunity of, varying some heights here in these buildings and really having in its location where it is on Shinden there, having the opportunity to do something a little bit different there, and also then provides that kind of a variety of housing types and experiences. So I don't know, that's one that I mean, for sure, along the Coffee Street there, I don't think there's enough done on those facades to satisfy that requirement.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's often designed at this moment rather than from the beginning. And I think if those end units are treated as kind of the jewels of the project and the opportunity to make something unique and creative, then we'd have a lot more successful project. But it's just, oh, they want it facing the street, so let's turn the door from here to there and put a gable on it. And I don't think that the solution is addressing, of course, we need to actually have that go to the street, and that would probably reflect in an updated site plan where that frontage actually comes from Coffee and there's a direct connection from Coffee. But I agree with your sentiments there, Brett, and would be looking for something that looks like a street facing building, not the side. It still looks like the side of the building. And as well, I think from the pre-app to this application, the pre-app had examples of 3-story buildings, which is suggested in the comp plan for this designation, and as well as kind of an urban feel, which I don't know that it's obviously not 3-story, and I don't know if this is successfully an urban feel. But what I'm missing from some of the examples and some of the precedents that they drew on, which was suggesting where they were going with this in the pre-app, we had kind of a variety along Chinden. We had sawtooth roofs, we had even sawtooth floor plans that was providing some, solid and void on that street frontage. And I think that coming down Chinden from HP or going up or whatever's there now, or going up Chinden Boulevard, this will look like one long building with one consistent roof height. So I think for this to be successful, it needs to have some varying in maybe the floor plates, maybe the number of the floor plates, the roof lines. It's reading as one long development at this point, one long building at this point. And then a couple of
even placement relative to Chinden,
Sure.
and maybe some
Sure.
undulation in how those buildings are placed. I mean, just something needs to happen there to, I guess, get away from that visual. These are 2-story buildings. They're same height gables running down the street, and all those buildings are aligned. And I would agree, as you're going either direction on Chinden, it's gonna be one long facade.
Yep. And then a couple other little points that were mentioned in the staff report are like the terminal view into the garbage. We need to take care of that at the end of that long drive that comes off of Coffee.
I guess I would even question the location of that as this first, visually, the first element that you see in front of that building, traveling east. It's the trash enclosure.
Yeah, there's the Coffee Street terminal view, and then there's, that's another thing that bears mentioning is, why is that the first thing? It's almost like that's your welcome to the development sign. And then parking there too. I think the guest parking there on the east end west end, sorry, traveling east, but the guest parking can be screened successfully with some landscaping elements. But I agree, the trash enclosure there is suspect.
I guess, and also looking at this here, it might benefit. I noticed there's a lot of interconnectivity with pedestrian pathways through the buildings along Chinden. There's the kind of the same with the interior buildings, but the ones along the Thurman Mill drain, there's no connectivity between those structures, like back into the central part of the development. And there's the outlet access point off of Coffee, and then on the other end of those 3 buildings. And so adding some additional pedestrian pathways or connectivity between those would be, I think, helpful in just providing that overall connection between all the buildings and the open space.
Yeah, agreed.
I think we're going to need to see this again and see some work on the Chinden facades or building placement, or massing, and definitely along Coffee Street as well. Just the connectivity, those end units.
Agreed. And then there was mention of variety as well, and obviously we're looking for that in the architectural treatments. But it was mentioned that pricing may be a variety, and that's not something that we look at. We're looking for architectural variety, and planning and zoning is looking for, you know, unit variety. And that may be, you know, building 7 and building 14 end caps. Maybe those are studios or 1 bedrooms, 2 of them, and they share tandem parking or something creative where we do have something other than the, you know, kind of the programmatic, here's what we're going to build because here's what we think people will buy. It's an opportunity to do something creative. But the fact that a Chinden one may be a different price from a Thurman Mill one, you know, that's not the type of variety that we're looking for. And then there was mention of trees behind sidewalk versus in front of sidewalk. And obviously we're gonna suggest and recommend that the trees are protecting the pedestrian from the Chinden Boulevard and creating a better experience for the pedestrians and bicyclists that use that sidewalk, and for the residents. Then they have, you know, there's an opportunity for both, right? There's the, you know, protective element of the trees along the street, and then there's opportunity for the personal landscaping on a closer level to the building.
All right, to note, it's sounding as though the committee is looking for a continuance of this. Just to note, the October 3rd meeting is the regularly scheduled October 3rd meeting is canceled. So the next available date would be the 17th. And any revised materials would need to be to the city by
2 weeks ahead of time.
at least 2 weeks ahead of time. The October 3rd meeting will be canceled. There is a special meeting scheduled for the 29th.
Of
So
this-
that would be,
You'd have 3 days to turn material.
mhm. You'd have to have the material in, and it wouldn't be, there would be an adequate time for staff to review it on the 22nd.
And that's already a pretty full agenda, or am I imagining things?
There are 3 pre-application meetings on that agenda.
Okay, it's those.
So the committee members, you probably can't hear the applicant's request to meet the special meeting timeframe of the 29th. That would preclude any staff analysis. It would be just application materials.
So we can continue it then, and if it wasn't complete, continue it again to the 17th or 19th or whatever you said.
That would be an option.
So I would move to continue it to a date certain of the 29th of September for modifications as we discussed.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Again, thank you to the applicant and those who are in attendance for this item. And that brings us to discussion. As already has been alluded to today, there is the special meeting on the 29th and the meeting on October 3rd will be canceled. Is there any other items for discussion by the committee?
Any applications we've seen that have done anything in city council that was different than what we may have expected or new information?
I don't remember if we've briefed you on the Petra Point application. I believe, perhaps we've noted that that was denied. The applicant has requested a reconsideration and a reconsideration was granted. So that hearing will be scheduled for the second city council meeting in October
Reconsideration by council.
by council, correct?
And is that the one with the easement up the side of it on Adams?
And that is it. So it's technically Allworth, but yes, Adams.
Oh, yeah.
And some of the major points with that subdivision were lack of parking and bringing trash enclosures to the street. They've proposed at this point in time to increase the height of their structure to allow for tandem parking.
Thanks.
Thank you. Another discussion point, last Monday, the city council approved the contracts. So I do anticipate that we will have this format probably at least through November, December easily, and to get through the backlog of applications that submitted under this particular process. And I will be getting you hopefully early this week the contracts to start working towards the consultants process.
So there's submitted applications, and then those are potentially, we may have a pre-app for an application at the end of October, and then the application actually in November, and then come back with more information. So that's going to be a diminishing number of applications as we get through, and then at some point we may just be hearing one that keeps coming back for whatever reason.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So the process of today, I do anticipate diminishing. We do have somebody already requesting a pre-application meeting with you as consultants. And so offline, I'm sure we'll be trying to schedule that as well with you.
Great. Thanks for the updates. Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
You betcha.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Thank you. I appreciate it. See you soon.